cite your sources, check your information. Let's be better about that. Hey, what's up, you all? This is Jacob. Welcome back to Sunday Yap Session, the show where every Sunday I hop on here and yap at you all about something with some sort of cohesive through line to carry us all through, and sometimes we do better than others. If you enjoyed today's video, please be sure to give it a like because that helps me out quite a bit. And if you want to come yap with me every single Sunday, be sure to hit that subscribe button because I upload at least once a week and sometimes more. Key lime pie, I always say key lime pie when it's just key lime LaCroix. I always say key lime pie because back when I was a kid, I would eat like the key lime pie Yoplait all the time. Leave a comment below if you remember Miss Key Lime LaCroix pie. I can't even say it right. Y'all know what I'm talking about. So today is a very interesting day. I am recording this on the day that is both MLK Day and the day of Trump's inauguration, which just feels like sinister. That's evil and dark-sided, and that should not be. I mean, one of those days should have been moved because this ain't right. So it's been very spooky vibes today. I am also recording a couple days, or like a day or so, I guess, really, after this whole like TikTok ban that lasted all for like 12 hours, so on and so forth, and like the whole fiasco that came with that. If you were not on or around the TikTok circle around that time, it was wild. People were crashing out. People were like spilling their deepest, darkest secrets as a last goodbye. And it was really gaggy seeing everybody show up the next day and just being like, oh, okay. Like you had influencers revealing that their entire setup and gig was a lie and all this weird like messy stuff that I don't understand like why they would even post, especially when people are trying to transfer their audiences over to other platforms with like blah, 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 blah. But amidst all of that chaos, something that I've been noticing for a while started to creep up, and this is something I want to talk about today, is like the conspiracy theories and the fake news and the misinformation and all of that I am seeing on the rise more and more in left-wing spaces. I've seen a lot of people online kind of referring to this as like blue MAGA or blue anon, and I kind of want to get into this today. Largely, I want to talk about a lot of like the misinformation that's been spread surrounding this TikTok ban, but I also want to tie this largely to like the election, where I think a lot of this stuff really ramped up because I am just seeing so much blatant misinformation being spread very authoritatively too, because I know a lot of online spaces, it's all about like speculation. I'm not talking about all that. I am talking purely about people who are getting online and just saying things that are not true, are not cited, have no source, and may have some basis in reality, which is how these things sort of catch on. Let's just get into it. We'll go ahead and start with all the TikTok stuff since that's more relevant, and then I want to tie this to the election, like I said. So there was all this stuff going on with the Supreme Court and Congress and all of that, legislating to basically force a forced sale of TikTok. TikTok said, no, we're not gonna do that. Like, if y'all are gonna do this legislation, we're just gonna close the doors on American operations. And then you saw, because the original legislation was packaged in a deal that involved getting aid to other countries, the ban got passed through, not on its own merit, but largely because it was packaged in with other stuff that was more important. So a lot of people voted yes on it and were now kind of scrambling to try to do something about it. Because if you weren't aware, TikTok has contributed $24 billion in revenue to America's like economy. So this is like a huge deal. And so you had Joe Biden saying he was working on doing some things to try to resolve this. You had people in like Congress and in the Senate doing all these things, trying to reverse the ban, so on and so forth, which we can talk another time about how all of this was like rushed and how we should have been addressing these things, not up until the last minute, but like we'll get into that another time. But because of all of that, TikTok was down for I think like 12 hours or so over this most recent weekend. And then the next day it came back up and we were all greeted with the message, and I'll put the message on the screen, but basically TikTok had like a direct acknowledgement thanking President Trump for why this happened, for giving assurance that TikTok could go back up. And the number of just like conspiracies and all of that from that alone were spiraling. You had people conspiring that they were gonna do a private sale to Meta, or that the sale had already happened, not that it was even like planned. People were conspiring that TikTok had been moved to Meta servers because the app was acting a little bit funky and some of the videos were a little bit lower quality than they typically would. You had people conspiring and speculating that Elon bought it. All of these weird and wild and wacky conspiracy theories that like are so absurd, not only just on their face, but also if you just look at the evidence that has been presented, what the actual situation was very obvious. Because right before the ban went through as well, Biden put out a statement and basically was like, hey, yes, this is passing, but we're not going to enforce it. And TikTok came out and put out another statement, and I'll put all these statements up. They basically said, hey, we are actually going to shut it down because we have not gotten enough assurance from President Biden that we're not going to have issues and face legal consequences because of this ban. And I think a lot of people are just thinking about this as like TikTok just like flicking an on and off switch and deciding if the app's going to be going or not. But there are so many other parties involved with this. So you have TikTok, the company. You also have all of the app stores that are hosting it and delivering updates. You also have Oracle, who houses all of the US data, or a lot of the US data. Then you have all of these like cloud service providers, internet service providers, the people who provide like making TikTok live a thing, so on and so forth, the people that do like moderation and those like services. I know a lot of that is like, I think is AI done, so like that's got probably data centers and servers behind it as well. So there are all of these other entities that are involved in making TikTok a thing. It's not just the company itself. If you are looking at this like someone who is looking at objective facts and reality combined with the statements, it's very obvious to me that whatever Biden put out was not enough assurance that not only TikTok, but also all of its partners involved with it were not going to face legal consequences. Because as someone who sat and watched like the entire oral arguments of the Supreme Court hearing and has been like reading about the case and so on and so forth, like I mentioned earlier, this really wasn't a ban. It was just placing a lot of like restrictions and fines and penalties on everyone who was making TikTok a thing basically, and it was going to charge people with fines essentially for working with them. I believe for the app stores, it was going to be $5,000 per individual user, several billion dollars essentially, because it has like 170 million users. So that happened. And then TikTok put out another statement, which kind of coincided with like TikTok being back on live, so on and so forth. And it basically like thanks Trump for working with them, said that like they're going to be able to bring things back up and they're going to be in negotiations. Now, instead of conspiring about what that means, we can look at the verbatim statements and use our common sense and probably assume that Trump gave them some more assurance that, hey, I'm going to be president tomorrow. I'm not going to enforce these things. And here are like the kind of terms I want to deliberate on as far as cutting a deal, which we have now seen now with Trump saying publicly that he wants to have like 50% US ownership or stakeholders within TikTok. And so like what actually happened in the circumstances that led to the ban and how it's back up now are very, very obvious. And then the stuff, like I said, with like the quality being weird and blah, 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 I think it should be kind of common sense that like, if you turn off a huge, massive, cross-national like web-based application, there is going to be some delays and technical difficulties and weird things going on from powering it all back up again. And so I was seeing all these just like conspiracy theories, like I mentioned earlier, specifically in regards to Meta, because also people were finding that like Facebook has an official TikTok account that's verified. And a lot of people were seeing that for the first time and they were like, oh my gosh, see, Facebook they bought TikTok and they're on here, blah, 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 blah. A lot of people have been seeing that like there is a kind of integration feature where you can link your TikTok to your Facebook. And people were like, oh my gosh, see, they're trying to like link the accounts together, blah, 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 blah. When like that feature has been available for a while. It was getting really spooky and ridiculous. And I was seeing people that like I respect too, like people that I am mutuals with, people with really big followings that were just like saying all of these things that were not true, were not based in reality, and just like spreading hearsay as if it was objective fact. And it like spiraled so fast into all of these conspiracy theories. And I find that really, really concerning because I think a lot of times when we think about conspiracy theories, misinformation and disinformation, there's kind of a stereotype that these are largely things that are just happening in like right-wing circles, like your kind of QAnon, like Pizzagate, the people that are like drinking raw milk and stuff like that. I think a lot of it has like a really strong right-wing affiliation, and understandably so. A lot of times they are the ones that are peddling these things. But with this whole like TikTok stuff, a lot of the content I was seeing gave me very similar vibes to like those posts that you would see from like your boomer parents or family members on Facebook. Like those little, like, I'll see if I can find one, those little like posts that they would make that be like, Facebook is rolling out a new policy that says they can steal your data and da 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 da. And if you don't post this status by this time, then they'll take your data, but I am posting just like weird stuff that just like is not true. And if you look into it, like it makes no sense. And it's getting very concerning, especially when it's coming from like people my age too, because I think largely with these conspiracy things as well, you're thinking about like older generations who may not be as tech literate. Like it is getting very concerning how quickly people are like jumping to believe things, especially when a lot of these creators that are spreading these things like are not even citing any sources either. I think it would be like perhaps a slightly different story if these creators were like listing certain citations or like saying where they got their info. A lot of it is just people like talking. Just saying that like this is a thing that's happening and like not providing any sort of evidence that it's happening. And I'm seeing these videos get like tens of thousands of likes and reshares and posts and things like that, and people like freaking out and crashing out and saying that like, oh my gosh, Meta is owned by TikTok, it's happening, Zuckerberg owns this program. Y'all, we gotta remember to look at the facts. Like, oh my god. And like I mentioned, I've been seeing a lot of this stuff kind of on the rise, kind of around the election. And I think a lot of the stuff surrounding the election was when things were getting really spooky and I was really starting to see people that were truly just like living in delusion and like were not accepting reality. And that's kind of how I feel about this too. But like, I think the thing that kind of had me like gagged and like worried for some of y'all's well-being and comprehension skills is when people were kind of like conspiring that the election results were inaccurate and were coming up with all of these sort of conspiracies about like voter fraud and blah 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 blah. People suggesting that like Kamala had a secret plan, that she was going to launch some investigation into the election results, making comments about like how calm and her demeanor was in kind of this transfer of power when she lost and things like that. And just talking about like, oh, well, she's being like calm and collected because she has a secret plan and she's gonna launch this investigation to see who really won the election. And then Kamala will be the president and we will have our brat summer president. Like, I laugh because it's just like a fantasy. It is spooky how much of these fantasies and like conspiracy theories will get brought up when, like I was saying earlier, the actual truth, which is much more obvious, is that based on the integrity of the votes, both now and the history of our voter integrity, voter fraud and like fraudulent votes and all of that is very, very uncommon. It is not something that is super rampant throughout our elections. And also, if you look at how like Biden and Kamala have acted, and also just like presidents in the past, I think the more obvious answer is that they are all invested in respectability politics, which is extra goofy and like really had me disillusioned about this election, especially because during the election cycle, they were all talking about how like, oh, Trump's like a fascist, blah, 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 blah. He's a threat to democracy. He's going to cause the downfall of America, which I agree with, to be clear. But then like, as soon as she lost, she's like, okay, well, we're going to respectfully pass things over. And like, it was a fair fight, guys. I'm just like, and like similar thing with like, who was it that just recently died? Former president. And it was like pictures and videos of Obama and Trump sitting next to each other, like chatting and having like casual banter and stuff. It's like, I think it's very obvious that so many of these people are just invested in respectability politics and care more about decorum than like actually fighting fascism. That's the reason why she seems so calm, cool, and collected, because that's what they all tend to do. Like, it's getting weird. All of this stuff is just such an important and valuable reminder that we all need to keep in mind. Conspiracy theories, propaganda, misinformation, disinformation is not limited to just like one demographic, one political ideology, one age group, so on and so forth. There are tons of people who will just get online and just say whatever, whenever, about anything. Don't really care if they're right or wrong or not. And largely, I think a lot of these people are doing these things to rile people up. And we need to be a little bit more discerning about the information that we're consuming. I want my 2025 resolution, and I want y'all to all do this as well. If you are seeing stuff like this, call it out, especially if it's people you know about or care about or have like some vested interest in. Call them out, because I don't think all of these actions are intentional, but we all do need to be held accountable with all of this stuff. And especially now that we're going into the second Trump presidency, I think it is going to be more important than ever to be able to be discerning about what is fact, what is fraud, what is actually happening in objective reality, what is evidence-backed, and what is misinformation, disinformation, and like the fake news of it all. Because to the point of a lot of people that are scared and concerned about like Meta or some other social media company getting involved with TikTok, I do think that based on some of the things that Trump has said himself, see how I'm citing my sources? I do think, especially with the history of Trump being so anti-China, I do think that a motivation for having it being 50% owned by the United States is to have more of a say on what is spoken about on the platform. Because I think that is largely why so many people in politics, in our government, are concerned about TikTok being a thing. Because it is largely something that the United States or US-based companies don't have a lot of control on as far as information spread, community organizing, political conversations, so on and so forth. And especially as the American public becomes more and more unhappy with the quality of life, and with all of these people that are in control of all the other social medias bending the knee to more conservative ideologies, I think that there is a desire for some level of a state-owned media, or at least media that the state can have more of a hand on. Those statements are very obvious and based in reality and fall in line with the history and trends of fascist governments and actually make sense, and not like this secret conspiracy that Meta already owns TikTok and that the servers were migrated over to Meta and they're secretly doing this deal that isn't published about and blah, 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 blah. Like, I think the world already is so scary and there are so many scary things going on that we know about, that we know that are true, that we have facts to back it up. These conspiracy theories and fake news and all of that about things that may happen, like it seems unserious and silly and also just like such a waste of time when we have real threats that we know about that we should be doing things about. So my hope is that we all do better in these upcoming years when these skills are going to be more important to hone than ever. If people are saying things and they're not citing their sources, if they have no information to back this up, if they're not pulling from primary or secondary sources, question the information that's being told to you. That goes for me as well. Like I try to do my best to cite my sources when I'm talking about things that are a little bit more complex and just aren't based on my personal experience. But if you see me say something and it doesn't feel cited enough for you, drop a comment and say, where did you hear that? Where did you get that information? Do you have a source for that? I'm trying to be better about that. I want you all to be better about that as well. And I think those skills are going to be very important as we move forward. That's pretty much all I got today. Cite your sources, check your information. Let's be better about that. Can you tell I went to journalism school and really value like accurate reporting and information? Y'all, this stuff is so important to me, so really take it seriously. But yeah, that's pretty much all I got today. I am wishing you all the best as we move forward with these spooky times that we're about to be in. This is gonna be a time that's really important to like tap into the community and the people around you and get to know your neighbors. So if you haven't started that now, it's time to get to it. Hope you all have a nice rest of your day. Thank you all so much for watching. Again, if you enjoyed today's video, please be sure to give it a like. That helps me out quite a bit. And if you want to come yap with me every single week, be sure to hit that subscribe button because I upload at least once a week, sometimes more. And I will see you all in the next yap session. Bye.